with sixth graders. Thank you for those who are able to join the meeting today. Those who weren't, here are the questions for the packet. Make sure you have these written down. So we'll start with number one here. You had to write two ways that Dakota and Ojibwe are similar, two ways they were different. I have more here. Just make sure you have at least two of these. So the couple of different ways Dakota and Ojibwe are similar. They both lived in villages. They both lived near a source of water. Any chance they could get to be by water, that just makes their life a lot easier. Both, if they were close to a lake that had it, they both harvested wild rice. And if they were near a patch of maple trees, they would both harvest maple sugar. Some differences between the Dakota and Ojibwe is they both spoke different languages. The Dakota had teepees, whereas the Ojibwe lived in wigwams. The Ojibwe made their canoes out of birch bark, and the Dakota made their canoes out of hollowed out logs. And the Dakota were here first. Now, I would suggest that as I'm going through this packet, pause this video if you need time to write these answers down. That would be my recommendation. Don't try to keep up, because I'm going to talk a lot faster than you can probably write. So make sure you pause it if you need more time. Question number two, another name for Ojibwe is Anishinaabe. What does this term mean? The textbook calls it original people. Some other ones that we talked about this chapter, Anishinaabe could also mean true people or real people, but the textbook says original people is what Anishinaabe means. So the Ojibwe and Anishinaabe are the same group. And the Anishinaabe is the term the Ojibwe call themselves. Question number four, it says if the Ojibwe were making their journey today, name 3 states they would pass through. You only had to name 3. I put all of them they would have: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. So remember, they started on the East Coast by the Atlantic Ocean. They migrated west. That's where it's important you look at that story of the Ojibwe migration that's on Google Classroom. And they stopped for various reasons, whether it was somebody having a dream or a vision, things like that. So read that story. According to that, the story of the Ojibwe migration, number 5 here, the Ojibwe knew they made it to their final destination when they found food that grows on water, wild rice. And the Ojibwe wild rice is Monoman. With the Ojibwe and many other Native American groups, for question number 6 here, when they hunted animals or harvested crops, they were very thankful for what they were receiving. So they wanted to offer gifts. And the gifts they offered is tobacco and food. Now, tobacco, today we think tobacco, cigarettes, bad for you. Don't ever do it. But so tobacco is a ceremonial thing. It's very important to a lot of Native American cultures. So the Ojibwe would offer tobacco as a gift to the animal, to the nature, to the plant, saying, thank you for giving your lives so that we may live on. So it's just one way of showing their thankfulness that they had that the animal died for them. This next part goes through each of the 4 seasons of the year and what the Ojibwe did during that time. And again, reminding you to pause the video if you need more time to get these answers down. So in the spring, they lived in the sugar camp. Again, those that were close to maple trees to get the maple sugar, that's where they lived. Some other activities they did during the spring is they would repair and build any lodges. That's where they would spend the spring. The men would start to hunt. The boys would help that. Of course, maple sugaring. And then they made canoes. And as we mentioned earlier, the Ojibwe made their canoes out of birch bark. Then we go to summer. They would make their village near a river or lake. Again, being by a source of water makes life easier. Some things that happened in the summer, they would have feasts and dances. Because remember, in summer, they're in larger groups. This is when they all come together and live in large groups. The women and girls would collect berries. The children would play games. Lacrosse was a big game. They'd plant crops. That's usually late spring, early summer. They're planting crops. During the summer, the men did not hunt. That was the one time of year they said no hunting. They want the animals to be able to increase their population. So during the summer, the men would travel, trade, and even fight wars if necessary. Then after summer comes autumn right here. In autumn, they would move to ponds, marshes, or lakes where they would find wild rice or monoman. So in the main village activities during the autumn is they would harvest wild rice, of course. The men would hunt. They'd be helped by the boys. They'd start preparing crops for winter, so getting them stored, harvesting them, because winter is going to be a hard time. Next thing on here, men and women caught and dried fish. So they'd catch them, put them above fires to smoke them to dry them out. Autumn was a really big, important time for preparing for winter because you don't have as much food sources as you do in the summer. So then near the end of autumn, they'd start packing their belongings, moving to their winter camp. Now going to winter, they would move to a village in the forest. And remember with the Ojibwe, come winter, they're spreading out. They're not living in large groups anymore. They're going to move to smaller groups deep in the forest, a little more protection from the cold. Some things that happened in winter, the men and boys hunted and trapped. Women and girls were cooking meals during the winter, whether it was the fresh meat the men and boys were hunting or leftover stuff from the autumn, animals, crops, things like that. Women and girls during this time made clothing, whether it was leggings, moccasins, anything like that. And they made them out of animal hides, especially in northern Minnesota. They had been made out of deer hide. During the winter, the older women would take care of making fishing nets, making hunting bags, getting ready for the spring and fishing. And they played and listened to stories. Remember, winter was the only time that oral tradition took place. Question number 8. Why did the Ojibwe and Dakota form an alliance in 1679? They formed it, each had their own reasons for forming this alliance. The big thing I really want you to get out of here, if I don't know, I'll be able to highlight the part I really want you to have because it's being weird. I don't want to highlight the whole thing, just, well, that little part there. Is this alliance was formed. When you form an alliance, you're forming something to work together. And the Dakota wanted this alliance because they wanted access to European trade goods that they saw the Ojibwe were getting, especially trading with the French. So the French were a big part of forming this alliance. So the Dakota wanted those things like guns, blankets, cloth, metal pots and pans, things, those trade goods the Dakota wanted. And the Ojibwe wanted this alliance because they wanted more land to hunt on and they wanted land to live on. And they wanted that land from the Dakota. So they agreed, okay, we'll give you more land, you give us these trade goods, then we'll form this alliance. So that helped create some peace between them. So the big thing for that question, which will probably be on your test, which is on Friday, is making sure what the Dakota got out of it and what the Ojibwe, why they each wanted that alliance. Number 9, a sovereign nation can rule itself. That was one of your vocab words. Name 2 things that a sovereign nation can make for a decision that a sovereign nation can make for itself. Question number 9, there are more than one answer. You had to have 2 of them. The big thing is when you're a sovereign nation, you can govern yourself. You can make decisions for your own group. Some of those include, where do you live? You can decide as a sovereign nation, where do you want your group to live? Who do you trade with? And who do you fight? So sovereign nations have all the power to do those things. They can make choices for themselves. Okay, so now we're going to the page 15 of your packet, which I accidentally clicked out of. So going to page 15 of your packet. So question number 1 here, or sorry, not page 15, page 23. Page 15 was from the Dakota packet. Sorry about that. So page 23 here. Number 1, early Ojibwe people harvested wild rice in the spring. That is false. Harvesting wild rice took place in the fall. So that's what's incorrect here. Now this one I don't have the answers written in, so you'll have to make sure you're listening to my answer. So number 1 was false. Number 2, the Ojibwe migrated westward from the East Coast. Number 2 is true. They started on the East Coast by the Atlantic Ocean and they migrated west until they found the food that grew on water. Number 3, the Anishinaabe were another group who lived near the Ojibwe people. That is false. What makes that one false is Ojibwe and Anishinaabe, they're the same group. So they didn't live next to each other. They were the same group. Anishinaabe is the term the Ojibwe people use for themselves. Number 4, early Ojibwe and Dakota were always at war. That's false. We just talked about the alliance they formed. So they were not always at war. Number 5, many Minnesotan place names are based on Ojibwe words for that place. That is true. Like Mississippi River, Lake Superior, Bemidji, Menominee. They all have names that are tied into the Ojibwe language. There is a chart in the ebook, I don't remember the page off the top of my head, that has some examples of that. So you can look through chapter 4 of the ebook and see some examples. Okay, going down to the matching part here. Number 6, wigwam, that is B. That is home in winter. So 6 is B, home in winter. 7, summer season, that is F, when men traveled and traded. So that's what the men did during that summer. So 7 is F. 8, sugar camp, that is G, village location in the spring. So 8, summer sugar camp is where they move to in the spring. So 8 is G. 9, lacrosse, that's a popular team sport. So 9 is C. 10, winter season, that is A, time of quiet and seclusion. Seclusion means kind of, on your own, living in your own world, and kind of taking it quiet. So 10 is A. 11, rice harvesting, that is D, that's a fall activity. So harvesting wild rice took place in the fall. So 11 is D. And number 12 is E, form of transportation. So again, the Ojibwe made their canoes out of birch bark. So 12 is E. Question number 13 says, list at least 2 pieces of evidence that support the following statement. In many ways, early Ojibwe life was connected to nature. So make sure for that one you have 2 ways the Ojibwe were connected to nature. I'm not going to go over answers. That one I will read them when you submit them. Make sure you don't submit this until I ask you to, which will probably be next week sometime. Thank you for watching my video. If you have any questions, please let me know. Take care.